Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fishing for Men. We're glad you're here. I'm Spencer. I'm one of your co-hosts, and today we're going to be jumping into episode 2 in our series on trials. So if you were able to pay attention and you caught up on last episode, we talked a lot about the Japanese art form of wabi-sabi and what the Bible tells us about trials. And today we're going to jump in and talk about what do trials produce in us? Now that we have a firm foundation of what the scripture says about them, let's talk a little bit about what they bring to our lives. Before we do that, I want to introduce a few friends that I've got to kind of chat through this topic with us. To my left, I've got
Brandon here.
Cody's here.
Hey, Cole's here.
Hey, y'all, it's Billy.
All right, and together we will be talking about the benefit of trials, which sounds a little bit like an oxymoron. So, gentlemen, start your engines. I have a speed competition here.
Ooh.
So I'm going to give you a series of sayings connected to trials, and I want you to finish, and we're going to see who can finish them faster. All right? So no cheating. All right? So here we go. You ready for the first one? No pain?
No
No
gain.
gain.
Ooh. No guts?
No
No
glory.
Rome wasn't?
Built in a day.
day.
Pressure makes?
Diamonds
What doesn't kill you?
makes you stronger.
We all gave up to Billy. We're like, yeah, whatever.
It doesn't hurt till the pain goes away.
Yeah.
That was one my dad would tell me.
Another one. Yeah. Any others you can think of related in the same vein? I was trying to think of all the ones I could.
Get up and rub dirt on it.
Okay, yeah. So if you think about these, all of them seem to have the same message, that we have to endure some form of struggle to receive something worth having. Now, lucky for us as believers, the greatest thing worth having, our salvation, we didn't have to endure much, which is great. But we talked a little bit about and pointed out last episode that it's easier to push through trials when we get to voluntarily choose to enter them and we know what waits us on the other side. That can be a better physique, a new skill, freedom from addiction, anything that we voluntarily choose to enter into trials. Those are the easy-ish, quote unquote, to get through. But what about trials that we don't seek out? What do they produce? And so, listeners, our anchor verse for this episode is going to be Romans chapter 5, verses 3 through 5. And it says, "We know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character, and character hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us." So we're going to really jump into these idea of perseverance, character, and hope today as we drive through this. So we want you to really consider, Cole mentioned last episode, this idea of silver lining, finding the silver lining. That's one of the things he always tries to do. So that's our goal for this episode. Is we want you to see, hopefully you can just start to see the silver lining. You don't have to maybe fully believe it, but because it's not always fun, but there is richness in growing through our trials instead of around them. So hopefully as you start to see that silver lining as we dive into these things and talk about perseverance and character and hope, it's going to give you the courage you need to go through whatever you're facing today.
Are you sure God can't just like pluck me out of them?
Right? Just skip ahead, please.
Yeah.
That would be a no.
This is
Sorry,
in
Billy.
today's world of fast forward.
That reminds me of the movie Click with Adam Sandler.
Oh, yeah. God, wouldn't that
Fast
be
forward,
nice?
rewind, slow down.
$1 million idea.
Yeah.
That's after Fishing for Men. We'll get started on that. So let's talk about this idea that trials help develop perseverance. So again, going back to last episode's anchor verse, which was James 1, 2 through 4, one of the things we hear from that is that he says, "Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." And then we go into the Old Testament with Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31 that says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength," aka persevere. "They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." So two great verses to kind of complement what Paul says in his letter to the Romans. So starting our discussion with you guys. So perseverance can look different for all of us, what it looks like to persevere. So I want to start with kind of the negative. What are the things, when you think about trials, what are your biggest roadblocks? What are the things that get in your ways? It could be a trigger. It could be something. What can limit or hinder your ability to persevere in trials?
Playing the pity party game.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
Is that the same as like victim mindset for you?
I think so. Yeah, probably. Like, woe is me.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest one that I can think of right now. At least that's the one that first popped in my head. So usually I feel like the first one that pops in my head is probably the most.
Laziness.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good one too.
How does that look like for you? What kind, like how do you use that show? Because you,
I'm actually.
that is the last thing I.
Yeah,
consider for you.
I'm not actually thinking about myself. I'm thinking about my oldest daughter right now.
Sorry, Tessa.
Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. You'll learn from it. Just in athletics right now.
Yeah.
When things are tough, it just doesn't care,
Yeah.
you know. Just being lazy with it instead of putting her full effort in.
Yeah.
I think I even go back to what we talked about last week, which was, what was it? Avoidance, ignore. What was the other one? Do you remember? I don't remember what the other one was, but I'm thinking of like avoidance. Like,
Yeah.
all right, this is hard.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to do it and avoid it.
Yeah. Which connects to one of my biggest ones. The things that can sometimes get my way in trials is imposter syndrome. I don't have what it takes to make it through this, and I believe that. And that I am my own worst enemy. It's the 6 inches between my ears that can destroy my perseverance before I even try.
Another one that comes to mind is just feeling overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you start to play it out in your mind, and it feels like a tidal wave coming on you. Then it can be like, okay, I'm gonna shut down.
Especially if you start playing like worst case scenario.
That's actually kind of what I've been doing recently in my job hunt. Is like recently I've felt that like overwhelming feeling. What am I getting myself into?
Are you okay publicly disclosing that? Just want to double check.
I am completely fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that actually connects to something that's another one for me that I've talked to Cody about, which is I give equal level of priority to everything I'm trying to address in life. So it can be the smallest thing and it is the biggest thing when it shouldn't be. So then everything's a priority, so nothing's a priority.
Yeah.
And then that's what then fuels that I'm not good enough to manage all of this, and I'm just like, let me withdraw.
I actually learned that if you don't put the priorities on, they said on paper, but I guess it could be like a digital checklist too. But if you don't actually get them out of your mind, your brain will prioritize everything P1
Shoo. Yeah.
until you actually get them out and then actually work through the prioritization. Your brain doesn't know how to recognize which ones are more important than less important.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I noticed that whenever, so I keep a physical to-do list now just because I don't have another way of doing it that is actually helpful. So I actually keep a physical one, and not only do I keep the priorities, but I put dates and stuff like next to like when I want stuff done, just so that I can actually get it out of my mind. Or else I will sit and I'll dwell and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have like a million things that are all due tomorrow.
Yeah. I love that. Anything else come up for you guys?
I had one and I lost it while I was listening to Billy and thinking about that idea. I like that, but maybe it'll come back.
I'm gonna draw on my psychology masters. Have you guys ever heard of like you probably have, but internal locus of control versus external locus of control?
I have heard of that.
Yeah. So internal locus of control means I control my destiny. External says the circumstances in the world around me control my destiny. And that's one of those things is like I choose to focus on all the things that are happening to me instead of what's in my control to help me get through. Like, what do I have that I can do to get through a trial? Instead, I hyper focus on all the reasons I can't that are external. And that's a lot of times in coaching what we help people like focus on is like, you're focused on the external. How do I help you look inward and realize what you have to help you get through this?
Oh, I think that's a big thing in marriage, relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge.
How does that play in the Christian faith when God is really in control? Is that inward or outward?
Well, I think that's probably not recognizing, and this is my interpretation of that, would be you're giving so much power to those attacks and forgetting that your internal locus of control is driven, like the fuel for your internal is God.
Okay.
And you can call on that to strengthen that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
how I would think about that. So, but that's actually a perfect segue because we talk about, so these are our roadblocks. Things like the pity party, the victim mindset, the negative self-talk, feeling overwhelmed. What's the counter to that then? So I know knowing you guys, you've all made it through struggles. What are things you rely on to remain steadfast? What's helped you keep and maintain your perseverance?
Sharing the burden.
So community. Yeah, like we
huge.
ended with. Yeah, we talked about that last episode.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a relatively new practice for you, right? Something that you're kind of a learning behavior.
I think that I've shared it. I think I've shared the burden before, but not with a group like this.
Okay.
I've shared it with friends, but not a good, close-knit Christian community of friends.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
So it probably just fell on deaf ears in the past. And now I just have a better faith in knowing that you guys are actually praying for me and doing that stuff. So,
yeah. So Carrie, I think what I'm hearing like is it's sharing it, but also asking for help, asking and seeking out help, intercession, like prayers, like that kind of thing.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, tied into that, not trying to hold on to everything. You know, myself realizing that when I do that is when things tend to go worse. And part of that ties back into that negative self-talk.
Yeah.
When you open up and tell someone like out loud, it doesn't sound as bad, or that person's there to help point out where you've gone down that wrong path. So it's more or less saying the same thing as you, Cole, just from a little bit of a different angle. Another thing for me for sure is, and this has taken a lot of time and work, but understanding when, you know, I feel overwhelmed or I feel that negative feeling, like recognizing it first of all, and then stopping and being like, okay, I wonder what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. So just having that awareness and taking the time to almost like that reflection time, instead of trying to like get so hyper focused on how I'm going to solve my way through this, reflecting and figuring out what the root cause is.
Yeah. So I think a good example of that would be what Billy was talking about. So if I feel overwhelmed, like there's too many things going on, I don't know what I need to do, recognizing that and being like, I got a lot on my plate right now. Mm-hmm. What can I take off? Or what could I ask someone for help for? Or, okay, let's prioritize these if that's going to help my brain kind of just calm down and be able to process and tackle things. So write out that list or whatever it may be. That's kind of a simple example, but
yeah.
Or even the little things, in nothing small in God's eyes, but just sitting, just pausing and praying,
Yeah.
or pause and worship, and just try to give it to Him as much as possible.
Yeah. Love that.
What about, what we've talked about so far is when we feel like there's maybe something, like we have a bunch of stuff that's coming. What about when you have nothing you can do?
Nothing.
Like you're
Like you're completely out of control.
You're
of it.
sitting in this trial, tests, valley, wilderness, all the different analogies. There's literally nothing you can do.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So then what do you do? Like there is no prioritization list.
Yeah.
well, in the past, I know I turned to like unhealthy coping mechanisms, get stressed out, or, there would be times where I'd literally just get mad at God, not in the sense that I'd walk away from him, but I would argue with him. Like, I'm asking for help. I'm praying. Nothing's changing. What do you want from me?
Mm-hmm.
So wrestling honestly with what's going on, with God.
Yeah.
And opening it up. I still have those moments. Something that I've learned that's a lot more helpful for me is when I know something's going on, one, realizing I don't have control over everything like I think, or like I'd like to think that I do. But how I kind of make my way through times like that is just having a regular rhythm of spending time with God in the morning, not necessarily having an agenda. It could look like praying. It could be that wrestling that I was talking about. Other times it's just sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
I like it dark, so it's calm, and just being like, okay, God, I feel overwhelmed right now. I'm just going to sit here and I'm listening and I'm just going to spend time with you. And it's weird that's been like a practice I've had to learn how to do. But in that, man, I can walk away. I can wake up with my mind racing, feeling so stressed about things I'm going to have to face that day, or an ongoing trial, like having teenage children. And and I can walk away from it calm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And that's the Holy Spirit. Like I can't
Sure.
attribute it to anything else.
because there are those situations in life where there is literally zero things that you can do to change the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's weird to sit in those
Mm-hmm.
because we are so used to like wanting to do stuff.
How do we
all
fix
the
it? How do I?
And
get
even
out of
when
it?
we don't have things to go control, we try to feel things to control.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
control.
Yeah. And like you said, Brandon, as men, we're wired
Hard to fix.
Yeah.
and we always want to find the solution,
Yeah.
but sometimes we just don't have it. And you have to wait it out to see what the end result is.
Yeah.
You don't know how long that's going to take.
That was definitely that emotion, Billy, you're bringing up was my experience with my mom's cancer journey. Like you are at the mercy of this test and what it might bring, and you don't know. And one of the things that helped me as far as just staying, I guess, somewhat emotionally regulated through all that was Reddit. I found posts where people, it was like just groups of people that were going through the same thing.
Community, in other
Yeah,
words.
like finding community of like people that are going through this and like, okay, this frustration is normal and this is an experience of many people, and it doesn't, you don't fix it, you don't solve it, but for me there was just comfort in knowing, all right, these emotions are normal, these emotions are common. There's also a ton of Facebook groups out there that I found, and then that's when I started to realize like, oh well, here's people that have navigated this, like how to get connected with a social worker journey, and like that's when it just started to really help. So listeners, if you feel like that is you, because Billy's described what I feel like is a reality for a lot of people in situations like that, then that could be another solution too, is seeking community in ways you may not realize.
Another one too I'd like to mention, along with community, is something in my own personal experience. Like I think back to Billy's pity party. My pity party was that I don't have a mentor, I don't have a father figure, I don't have this or that. But my action there was go find a mentor, hire a counselor, hire a coach, that can help guide, because there are countless people out there that are willing to give their time.
Yeah.
And
Because that feels like an important distinction that you bring up, is there's nothing you can do versus not knowing what to do. And there's steps
that is
you can
good.
take.
See, for me, though, when I hear you say that, Cody, is I hear money, like
Right.
the cost of it.
Typically.
So I think for the listeners need to also hear that churches, if you're not involved in a church, a lot of churches offer counseling
oh yeah,
at a discount or even free sometimes. So seek that stuff out too.
Yeah, there's a lot of
you
stuff.
can.
And lots of times they'll have different types of program. Like our church has a 12-step recovery program, regeneration. You probably heard us talk about it. That's free. Or, we, all of us in this room are in a large group Bible study together. That's free. And in that, you can get community. You can find, like, I know in our particular Bible study, there's a good range of guys from like early 20s up into their, I don't know what the top one is, but probably like topping out over 70. And so there's a lot of wisdom in that room. There's guys in there that you could reach out to and be like, hey, I'm going through this. Could you help walk through this with me?
Yeah.
And, that's not an easy thing. You're not going to walk in a room one day and just go up to someone random and say that, but it starts with those
Sure.
baby steps. So I like what you said, how you phrased it. It's, not being able to do anything versus just not knowing what, what the options are, how you can get started.
Yeah.
don't go it alone.
Nope.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing to also remember, like, God is good all the time. He's good. And no matter what that situation is, he's also not abandoned you.
Yeah.
He's right there with you. And he's good. That's hard in those situations. I had to do that yesterday to remind myself, like, God, you're good.
Yeah.
I don't know what the situation holds. I don't know where it's going to go. But you're good. That is sometimes really difficult to trust, but man, it just takes a little bit of that burden off of, like, I don't know what's going to go on, but you're good. And I got to hand this over to you.
That's interesting. That makes me go back to that verse in James that we were reading earlier. And it says, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And as we were reading that, I was like, that sounds great, but what does that even mean? What does it mean to be complete and not lacking anything? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think there's probably a hint of it in what Billy just said. Like, I think it's almost like you have your faith and you use that to help persevere through hard times, and that strengthens your faith.
Yeah.
It's almost like a feedback loop, if you will.
100%.
And so that when you're going through times where it makes no sense and you can't see any good in it, that you're still able to say, I don't know what's going on. This sucks. I wish there was a way out right now. But even if there's not, God, you're good.
Yeah.
And I'm going to trust you.
Yeah.
And that could be the exact, because if you're going back to our anchor verse, because that's exactly where Paul goes next, which is into that sticking it out. I'm going to trust you produces character. And so I think this is a great segue into our second point, which is this idea of perseverance producing character. And so we supplement what Paul's verse with 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. And it says, in all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. So sticking to that phrase, proven genuineness of your faith can be revealed. And then we go to probably the poster child for trials, which is our man Job in 23 verse 10 says, but he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. And so I want to go back to just that phrase really quickly before we jump in. And first question is, when you hear that phrase, genuineness, proven genuineness of your faith, what does genuineness of faith mean to you all when you hear that? What comes up for you? No wrong answers.
Genuine.
I see Billy looking up something, possibly the Greek and what else it ties into.
No, Brandon, I'm not looking up other languages.
Okay. That's my wheelhouse, right?
You are the one who knows more.
Well, in this, I'll tell you what the Greek translation is. That Paul
Oh, it's
uses in
Spencer this time.
What is it?
It's being complete, without blemish. So
Genuineness of faith?
that's character. How
Oh,
you view
character. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But this phrase, genuineness of faith. Anything come up?
I'm rereading.
All I
the
can
verse.
think of is like a solid ground. Like, I don't know.
So I think about that phrase, character is what you do when nobody's watching. And so if we take that and we apply it to genuineness of faith, is how strong your faith is when it's not surface level, when there's nobody watching, when there's nobody to affirm it.
I go back to what Billy's example
Yeah.
of like during the trials, trusting God.
Yeah, give
That
like
trust.
true, genuine. Like I genuinely trust you. I don't just say I do. I don't write it down. I don't jump on a podcast and talk about it. But in the true trials, that's
I like that.
Is it real?
yeah.
Can it be called on?
Yeah,
Is it going to work?
exactly. And that's that strength. And so
That's why when I share my burdens with y'all, I know it's not falling on deaf ears, because I know there's a genuineness of faith here
yeah,
in this group.
yeah,
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, no, I was curious what Peter said in all this. Like, what is all this? And so I went back and looked at sort of the beginning part of it. And he's talking about your inheritance that you're going to receive in heaven one day. And he says, it's kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. And so there's almost this element back to the beginning verse of hope. Like there's this hope.
Oh, yeah,
There's this living hope that's always there. And in that hope, you can greatly rejoice in all situations.
Yeah.
No matter what that is. Because at the end of the day, your circumstances are going to change throughout life. But the Bible's very clear that you can rejoice in those situations regardless of the circumstance. And so even though you may have a hard time and it says you're going to suffer a little bit, you get to have this proven, genuine faith despite the circumstances that you're going through, because you know that on the other side of whatever that trial is, it doesn't even have to be after death. On the other side of that trial is goodness.
yeah,
Yeah. You said something, Cole, that made me think of what faith is. Like way back in Exodus when God passes in front of Moses and he gives a description of himself, and one of the words he uses is that he's faithful. God calls himself faithful. And that word, it also means truth, but the idea behind it is that it's like a solid, firm foundation. So it doesn't crumble underneath you.
Yeah.
You can trust it. So when you think about our own faith, it reminds me of when Jesus talks about like where you build your house. Like, do you build it on the rock?
Yeah.
Right.
Or do you build it on the sand? And so the proven genuineness of your faith would be like, when you hit trials, how do you respond?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Because we think about that phrase all the time, like he was a man of strong character, strong foundation, strong, all these things, all these. So we've talked about these things, but I'm curious, what does it look like in action for y'all? Like we say, I trust God. What do you do to lean into that trust? Is it during your morning prayer? Is it, what do you, I'm just curious, how does the genuineness of your faith take shape in your daily?
What immediately comes to mind is training. Like Cole is a fitness guru and his workouts are awesome, but they're very painful. But like he trains daily, and it builds up that strength so that when he's in a physically demanding situation, like he can perform, he can step up. And kind of the same thing with our faith, like that morning quiet time that I was talking about, spending time in God's word so that it's like implanted in my head and stuff. That's that training, right? So that when those trials come, like I can stand up to it or endure through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really good. I think of the fruits of the Spirit. That's how I try to just live out my daily life, is living by the fruit of the Spirit.
Yep.
Try not to live by the fruit of the flesh. So
It's interesting.
yeah.
I think having an anchor in truth is critical.
Yeah.
Not being wishy-washy on what truth is. I mean, if you've got that,
Yeah.
then when the fire gets hot, you can stay true to it.
How do you in your life like get that anchor? How do you know what truth is?
The Bible.
The Bible.
Yeah.
Just your morning routine. You talked about that in a previous episode. Like
Yeah.
just that quiet time in the morning for you with your Bible and a guide.
Yeah.
I think it's prayer,
Yeah.
but it's not just one time a day. It's got to be, what I'm trying to do now is like 3, 4, 5 times a day.
Yeah.
Whenever those things come, because there's also mini trials that we all hit every day. And we try to fix those ourselves. But like taking them back to God, or again, reminding myself that he's good, like every time. So it's morning, it's noon, it's night, it's right before I go to bed. Morning, it's noon, it's night, it's right before I go to bed. And then somewhere in between there too, there's prayers that happen.
When you get up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom.
You could. God, thank you for not letting me pee in my bed.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
I've never framed it that way. I'm like,
okay, fine. God, thanks for letting me walk to the bathroom.
Or when you gotta like clean up your kid's puke in their bed, you know?
Well,
Thank
that
you,
happened
God.
to that happened to Bud.
you recently went through that.
Too soon, Cole. Too soon.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that that I'm really a muscle I'm trying to grow, which is to give, like everybody says, trust in God. If you got strong faith, you'll trust in God. And if that's a grade, if I'm giving it's a C- right now, because when I hit a trial, my first thing is, what am I going to do to fix it? Instead of saying, God, what are you going to do? Help me solve this. And I think that's one of the things for me that I feel like what it looks like in action, and you may not be able to see it, but listener, if you're doing it, which is my first thing is to stop and ask for God first. Trusting God first to guide me to get through this. I don't. Like, people are like, yeah, well, have you talked to God about it? I'm like, no, because that's how like ingrained my self-reliance was for the longest time. Is I just didn't even, it wasn't I was actively choosing not to. I just didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah.
So
I've fighting through that too.
Yeah.
I've lived with a chip on my shoulder ever since I was probably 15 years old.
yeah.
I was always the smallest kid on the team. I watched money be a challenge in my parents' marriage, and so I remember making a commitment to myself that I would never let money be the issue that
Yeah.
came between our family. And so that was, I'm going to solve this. I got this. And so now I'm fighting against all of that to not be self-reliant. And one of the things that's helped is not framing it of a why God, but a where are you in this?
Yeah.
And reveal your love through this situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
That takes a lot of time to like figure out. Sometimes it doesn't answer you right away.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But part of that's gratitude too. Is hey God, where's your reveal where your love's at? Well, hey, be grateful to me first.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, okay. Like that's he punch your finger right back at you. And like I've been listening to a lot of things on gratitude lately, and there's I think it was this lady who had been picking something unique and specific for like, one story was 18 years and one was 32 years. Every day, a unique, specific thing she was grateful to God for.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
How many, like, that's a lot of things.
I know.
Yeah.
Like, I think about the 100-day challenge for Thanksgiving, 100 things you're thankful for. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah. That's not like, hey, God, thank you for this day. This is like, hey, thank you for,
Yeah.
2 legs. Well, that one's gone for the next 30 years. So what's the next one? But those are all gifts that I think we forget about.
Yeah.
And even in the things that suck, you got up this morning, you walked around, you have air in your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
You, depending on where you are, all of us, we have roofs over our head, we have food on our table. Like, there are so many things to be grateful for, and I think it helps you fight through.
Yeah.
Back to our thing, the pity parties.
That's really good. Yeah. I love the gratefulness part.
What's our, as we kind of start to pivot out of this, I'll just close with something that my counselor shared with me in a recent session that I've shared with you all, but listeners, it might be helpful. It was just this question he asked me is, what if the trial you're going through is exactly what you prayed to God to help you solve? Because I was asking God to like help me grow patience, help me be more loving. And so I found myself in these trials where my selfishness was winning out, or I was tested. And it's that question of like, I imagine God sitting there saying, you asked me to help you grow patience. This is
That's a dangerous prayer.
Yeah. It is. It is that's a super dangerous prayer to go pray.
yeah, like, it's just that interesting. You're not going to lift more weight if you don't lift hard weight first, So it was just this interesting thing.
Did it reframe your idea or perspective on if a test? Because I think I keep the word test or trial keeps like bouncing around in my mind. But did it reframe your perspective if they were positive or negative?
Yeah. Well, when somebody guided me through that exercise, yeah. But that's why I'm seeing a counselor.
Me too, brother.
Add me to that list. Same.
So, I mean, that just pointed out like it is, because I had a negative of like, man, this is so frustrating. It's like, no, this is kind of, and that's not for everything, listener. That doesn't apply to every situation.
No.
But it is a good thing, going back to last episode, about it is a little bit about our mindset and what's our heart posture towards what we're going through. So something to keep in mind. So let's shift into this last kind of fruit piece of the silver lining that Paul points out, which is hope. Character produces hope. And Billy's already alluded to this a little bit already. But
Sorry.
You're good. Perfect.
Eluder.
But I love that there's a few verses here. And one of them for me that I love is the Psalms. There's Psalm 34, 17-19. It says, the righteous cry out and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. And then John 16:33 says, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. And I feel like those two things just ooze hope. There's more. I feel like this whole series, this could just be like a litany of verses, and you all probably know a lot more here. But just how that character, perseverance, the grind produces character, produces this strength. And when you have that strength, you have hope. So one of the questions I have is, how do you guys see the connection between character and hope? And then the follow-up question to that is, have you experienced moments when hope sustained you, even when your circumstances seemed hopeless?
Can I get back to you on the second question?
Mm-hmm.
As in, like, in a few months? I'll let you know.
Well, we know that
Hopefully,
faith is playing a huge role in it.
hopefully we'll have an answer
Yeah.
Yeah,
in that one.
that's a big one.
But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like that's the only thing that's getting us through it right now.
Yeah,
Like we don't have, again, the reason I asked the question earlier is because I'm in that situation right now.
mm-hmm.
There's literally nothing we can do
Yeah,
except take each day, love this child while he's in our house.
mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Yeah. And that trust, though, you talked about.
Like, I have to.
Is like all we have left to do is trust, and that.
I have to trust that he's good,
Mm-hmm.
but I also have to trust that that good may not be good according to my good.
Yeah,
And that's the part that hurts.
yeah,
But I have to trust that he's good
yeah,
in the grand scheme of things.
yeah.
The connection between the two. Can you
Can
you have
Yeah.
genuineness of faith without hope? I don't think you can have one without. I don't think you can have genuineness of faith without the hope.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg thing
Yeah.
for you, huh?
Yeah. I think part of the genuineness of faith is having hope.
It's an interesting thought. I don't know.
Gosh, I wish we could have all of our listeners. Hey, drop a comment in response to that question.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this.
Why did you have to stump us, Spencer? Man.
Well, it just seems because that was a question I asked. Is as I'm reading through this, is how does character produce hope?
I'm going through some stuff with my teenage daughter. And in her particular situation, it's very easy for me to feel hopeless. But even though I don't see anything changing in the situation, like that's definitely one of the trials I'd say of my life where I am believing that God will do something and hoping for a different future for her.
I think for me that trust, that genuineness of faith is starting to be built by this. I have to constantly remind myself of God's track record in my life.
Yeah.
Of kind of the coaching question we would ask is, have you ever been in a situation like this before? And how did you manage that one? Looking back, like situations where I felt hopeless, and I can look and see how God moved that I didn't know at the time, but that's how hope has sustained me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where that genuineness of faith is trusting. And I build back that trust, because sometimes it can get fractured, as I have to do that exercise of like, take stock of every way God has provided and moved you in places you never thought you'd be. So Texas being
Such
one
a
of them.
laundry list.
Yeah. So in this moment, why is your hope
Wild.
faltering? If
Yeah.
this is how good he's been,
Yeah.
why is this situation
For sure.
different? And that was with my mom. That was with our journey to children. That was with so many things of like having to stop and say, wait, why doubt now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how do you do that when maybe you're not a believer yet,
Yeah.
but you're trying to figure it out, or you're new?
I think, like Spencer said, try to take stock in just your upbringing a little bit. Where do you see that God moved in your life? If
What I'm saying is, if you're a new believer, like you may not know that yet. Like
You may
don't
not be
have,
able to
you
see
don't
that
have
looking
that
back,
track record, or if you haven't even committed your life to Christ and you're trying to
Okay.
figure this out, like you're trying to question if that is God or not.
okay.
You know, so like there is an element where hope is built over a track record. But what happened what about those people who
Yeah.
don't yet, or they just have blinders onto it? Like, because that's obviously, there's things that I realized God was in places that I never saw 10 years ago.
Yeah.
This isn't really practical advice. I think a piece of it is when anyone who comes to salvation, God may work through a person, but at the end of the day, it's a working of the Holy Spirit in that
Yeah.
person's heart. So some of that, I think only God knows that answer.
Sure.
If there's someone out there that's kind of struggling, with like, do I really believe in God or do I not? And I hear what these guys are saying, but I haven't experienced it. I think one thing we bring up every once in a while that I think is good to keep in mind is just starting where you're at today. Mm-hmm. And it's okay not to be at the end of, that verse where we said this builds this and this creates this, you don't have to be at the point of hope now, but when you're going through that trial, test God. Try praying to him, or try going to the word and seeing what it says.
Yeah.
And see what he does.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we said last episode. He's big enough for your questions. He's big enough.
Absolutely.
He's big enough for the wrestling.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, because it says, and right there in Psalm 34:17, the righteous cry out and the Lord hears them.
Yeah.
When you cry out to the Lord, he hears your prayers.
Yeah.
He hears those cries. He hears those wrestlings like Brandon talked about. He hears those fighting words that you're like, I have no idea why on earth this is happening.
Yeah.
I don't see you anywhere. You're nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
How did we get here? Like, he's not afraid of those emotions.
Yeah. So I think that's where, and Cole, this is maybe where I might actually push back on your faith like hope, is that what gives you hope is that genuineness of faith, which is grounded in trust that what God says is true. And if I trust you, then I go into scripture and I read like Psalm 46, God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth may give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Though mountains may roar and foams may quake, God is there. God is our refuge and our strength. If I trust that, that gives me hope. So I have to have trust before I can have hope in my personal instance. I feel like that's a tricky one, Billy. Yeah, this is where we need a PhD or something.
We'll work on that. Okay, we're getting there.
Yeah. When do you go back to school?
Yeah.
Wait,
I'll
if
think
you
about
become
that.
a counselor, do we have to vote you off the podcast since we said we're not counselors or pastors?
We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Just playing. I wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that to you, Brandon.
This has been a great discussion. Looking forward to continuing it as we wrap up our series. But listeners, hope that this has just been meaningful for you, that you've heard through some of our examples, maybe how perseverance, character, and hope are waiting on the other side of whatever you're going through. So we wrapped up last episode asking you to take stock of what are the trials in your life right now and consider your heart's posture towards them. Are you looking at them negatively? What's your mindset around those? And so kind of next step in that exercise would be look at those trials you might have written down if you did, or consider where you are with them today and examine, like we talked about, how could God try to be moving through you to persevere? What is he trying to help grow in you? How is he trying to strengthen your faith with this? And maybe just for a moment, give yourself permission to try and see a positive silver lining in this. Because I think if you can get there, that's how we turn these phrases. Instead of no pain, no gain, you have no pain, no character. No, you have no guts, no perseverance. Rome, perseverance and hope and character weren't built in a day instead of Rome. We could trade all these things. Pressure makes hope, all those things. So that's what awaits us on the other side of our trials, even though they may not be easy at any point in time. Scripture is very clear in what they produce in us: perseverance, character, and hope. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for episode 3 in this series.